Hello and welcome back to another episode of Flick POV where we discuss our articles from flickpov.com. Today we're going to read about The Bear, and make sure you stay to the end of the episode so that you can hear my opinions and discussions about this article and Season 3. The Bear Season 3 was recently released and it is already creating a lot of commentary on Carmi's emotions, family drama, and PTSD from abuse in the kitchen. This series has always been controversial as it has been categorized as a comedy TV show. Audiences seem to disagree with it and have even said it doesn't have any jokes and that it is only drama. However, when I first read people's comments on social media saying it's not comedy, I realized I hadn't put much thought into it. Without denying its dramatic nature, I always thought it was funny. Watching the first 2 seasons, I couldn't stop laughing at Beef's dynamic with its workers and the jokes between Richie, Neil, and Theo. This last season, I couldn't stop thinking about opinions judging the lack of humor. I thought this season was still funny, but it delved a bit more into Carmi's demons as everyone else progressed with their lives. In the past 2 seasons, we got to see how Carmi grew up and went from being a young man to an accomplished chef with a complicated family background. However, this season we got to see how each character has faced their biggest challenges and how they overcame them. For example, episode 6, Napkins, was the highest rated of this season with a 9.3 on IMDb because it explored a very common struggle in society, which the media rarely touches. The theme of the episode showed us what it's like to navigate unemployment as a middle-aged Hispanic woman with no degree. This episode was very emotional because it showed us Tina's vulnerable and intimate side, which we rarely see as she presents herself as a strong woman with no weaknesses. It also showed us how even as adults, people feel lost and need help. More importantly, it touches on how nothing is for sure, including jobs. Things might change unexpectedly, and all we have left is to find ways of adapting. This episode is one of the season's greatest accomplishments, not only due to the themes it expresses and how they unravel, but because it was Ayo Edebiri's, Sydney, directorial debut. We also watched very emotional scenes like Nat's in episode 8, Ice Chips, when she goes into labor and the only person who answers the phone is her mom, Dee Dee. In this episode, Nat and Dee Dee mend fences by opening up. Dee Dee apologizes for the mistake she made whilst being drunk, and she also tells Nat that she has an idea on why she didn't tell her she was pregnant, but she still doesn't fully understand. To that, Natalie responds she had scared all of the family with her behavior. This mother-daughter scene is very emotional because not everyone has grown up with an alcoholic parent, yet almost everyone has struggled when it comes to family and accepting their loved ones entirely. I kept crying in the scene because I couldn't stop thinking about my mom. My mom has never been dependent on any substance, but she has been very judgmental towards my way of being. Just like Nat, there were a couple of years when I didn't speak to my mom, and reconnecting after years made me realize that loving and accepting a parent or a child is not always something one can do to the fullest. There will always be some things that one will disagree with, and some people can't cope with it, especially people dealing with mental illness. Growing old and forgiving your parents means understanding their mistakes came from an unstable place instead of an authentic one. Perhaps all those judgments weren't as true, but rather a projection of what our parents think of themselves instead of us. I think that is the way The Bear portrays the cycle of acceptance and forgiveness within dysfunctional families and ourselves. The thing The Bear nails is its comedic timing. In that same episode, after making audiences cry and think about their own experiences, the tension is broken when Dee Dee hugs Nat, and as she tries to massage her and alleviate the pain, she bursts out laughing, saying Nat's ass feels just like her father's. The most hilarious part of that scene is Nat's reaction, yelling an unexpected "what the fuck?" This kind of humor proves The Bear's position as a comedic show. Isn't that the true nature of humor? Saying something so out of touch, irreverent, and irrelevant at the perfect moment. The funniest things are the ones you expect the least. The funniest jokes are the ones you make when you think of their depth portraying circumstances in a completely different light, making unpredictable and ingenious jokes the most enjoyable ones. People who say The Bear is not funny are probably expecting goofy foolery and impulsive actions. But this isn't the Grown Ups franchise. If we wanted jokes about men dressed as women, we wouldn't be watching The Bear in the first place. The Bear offers complex humor with occasional banter like Neil and Theo's childish behavior. For example, when they visit Claire at the hospital and mention Carmi being in love with her, and then she asks Theo if he accidentally got in an operating room and him confirming it. Yet if we had Neil and Theo's dynamic constantly as the only source of comedy, we would get tired of it. The Bear masters comedic subtlety, for example, when Carmi tells Neil to serve the soup to the dinner guests, and he only pours water in front of them and then takes it back to the kitchen. This is humor at its best because it is irreverent. Overall, the Bear's humor is always relating to complicated feelings, just as the best jokes of contemporary comedy are. Although they are getting very repetitive and mechanical, nowadays jokes about colonialism are greatly appreciated by audiences because they are linked to a bigger problem. To be honest, people who continue to expect foolish humor instead of well-thought jokes are missing out on the wits of analyzing problems on a deeper level. Sometimes problems become too difficult to comprehend, and humor performs a life-saving approach as it increases the possibility of understanding the issue and overcoming it. For example, Theo and Neil's discussion before seeing Claire at the hospital. Quote, Theo, "Are we going to heaven?" End quote. Neil, quote, "What religion are we?" End quote. This joke reflects on how humans worry about good and bad, making it a matter that revolves around them, and if it will retribute them in the future. We rarely stop and think about how our actions affect other people's lives. It also plays a commentary on religion and how we are expected to be good and moral to be accepted in heaven as long as we follow the entitled wishes placed by that same religion. Reading Philosophy of Humor by John Muriel, I understood that, compared to all the documented philosophies and ideas in human history, comedy is the genre that has been studied the least. And the study of laughter and humor only began in the 20th century. Muriel even goes in detail by saying, quote, "Martian anthropologists, comparing the amount of philosophical writing on humor with what has been written on, say, justice, or even Rawls' Veil of Ignorance, might well conclude that humor could be left out of human life without much loss." End quote. That doesn't mean any record of what humor means for humanity wouldn't be important. It means the quantity of studies about humor is minimal compared to any other literature. If we were to analyze how humor has changed in the past 20 years, we'd see it has leaped in a different direction, especially in mainstream media. Think about what comedy meant for film and TV in the early 2000s. Jim Carrey was everywhere with his hilarious, silly, out-of-the-ordinary facial expressions. Phoebe Buffay was yelling after she realized her best friends were sleeping with each other or singing about a smelly cat. Nowadays, we have a world of mediatic overconsumption. People scroll through TikTok for hours and hours, consequent to the rise of Vine, with irreverent 6-second videos being the epitome of humor. In 2024, the most consumed type of humor seems to be the comedy stand-up and how woke jokes and racial class awareness comedians bring to the table. Now, people argue a lot about woke culture being the end of comedy. We have celebrity comedians fighting against each other, and we also have establishments demanding it. However, in the film industry, which differs from monologues on stage, it appears that audiences want something relatable. They don't want any more celebrities joking about how rich they are. Audiences want something authentic, but most importantly, intellectual. Viewers are craving jokes that make them think beyond the status quo. Is this phenomenon present in screenplays due to viewership demand, but also by the writer's intentions? I think humor is changing because society, with the help of social media and globalization, wants to express its feelings rather than cover them up. It is as if humor is now being used as a tool to cope with trauma instead of a weapon to repress it. That is what The Bear does with humor. It proves this new facet of what it means to be amusing or even hysterical. Okay, so for this article's discussion, what I want to say is... Okay, it's been a while since I wrote this article. It's been probably 3 months since The Bear was released. I am reading this in October, and The Bear was released in June. So several things have happened since. One of them being Jeremy Allen White winning the Emmy for Best Actor in a Comedic Series or Comedy Show. And people got very upset. The backlash in social media was crazy. People were saying that It is insane that Jeremy Allen White won for a comedy show. No one is denying his abilities and how good of an actor he is, because let's face it, he is. But people are upset because they still think the show is not comedic enough. And especially because there are other comedy shows that are very good, in which I also think awards are mainly focused on dramatic acting. What I mean with this is, I'm an actor myself as well, so sometimes it's very, very difficult to be funny on screen, and I also think that sometimes it's even harder to portray subtlety. Subtle expressions, subtle emotion that requires minimal facial expressions changing or minimal body language, but it's there and it's providing a lot. So I think that oftentimes these award ceremonies or these institutions which provide these awards take that for granted, especially if it comes from comedy. And many people take for granted how difficult it is to be a comedy actor because we have this glorified acting of the better you cry, the more you scream, the louder you are, the better of an actor you are, which I also think is, like a fallacy. To a certain point, it doesn't really prove how good of an actor you are. So I understand why people say that, and I understand why people are upset that Jeremy Allen White won for comedy when there are so many other runner-ups from comedy that should have won, but they didn't because they weren't crying or yelling on screen. Now, I also know that when it comes to writing, The Bear doesn't have as many jokes. And I also feel conflicted myself, because back then I was very, very confident that this show is funny, that this show is comedy. But now I'm starting to question, is The Bear actually redefining comedy, or are we just gaslighting ourselves so that The Bear can still continue to be considered comedy? Now, also, people are saying that allegedly, when Jeremy Allen White won the award, he was muted. And so what people are saying is that he was muted because when he won the award, he said, this show is not comedy. But I mean, honestly, who knows? I cannot really trust users from TikTok or Threads or Instagram. I mean, I had to be there to fully know if that was actually what he said or not. But let's assume that he did. And people are also saying that the reason why The Bear is running up for comedy, it's because of its length. Because the length of each episode is between 25 and 35 minutes. So it's not long enough to compete with dramatic shows. And I also thought about this. Are action movies not action anymore just because they are funny or because they have several jokes in them? Or let's think about other dramatic shows like Succession, because they have some jokes with perfect comedic timing in the middle. Are they no longer drama? Is Succession no longer drama because Roman Roy is funny? So now I really am second guessing myself. But also I want to say that I still think that The Bear could redefine comedy, but now we are at a point where script writing has, been kind of stuck. We are seeing the same things over and over. If we think about all these live actions or all these franchises that are repeating the same script over and over again because they don't want to risk doing something new and losing money, I do think that TV is what's sticking to authentic and original script writing because they don't depend on selling tickets at a movie theater once and that's it. They don't depend on the revenue just from its first release. I think they depend on different revenues so they can, be more free with experiencing and exploring what works, what doesn't. And so that's why we have interesting scripts like The Bear, which are, in the middle of so many different genres. It's comedy, but it's also drama, but I think it's just comedy and drama. But for example, if we think of The Substance, which is a movie that, risked a new screenplay and a new formula, it's horror, it's drama, but it's also comedy. So I think that nowadays we have these new scripts that provide something completely different and are in kind of a gray area when it comes to genres. So if now several productions are in the middle of genres and are in this gray area, then how can we differentiate them in categories if there are many things at once? So then, can we really blame The Bear for being considered comedy? Because it is funny. And it's also ironic because, it's uncomfortable. So many times when we're watching season 1 and season 2, The Bear's dynamic is so toxic and so fast that it makes you feel uncomfortable. And many times, because we feel so uncomfortable, we laugh. Because we either laugh or we cry or we don't really know what else to do. But then that comes into this other question. What is laughter? Like, what qualifies as good enough to make you laugh? And why do we laugh? And what's the point of laughing? Which we still don't know because, as I put in this article, we barely have any knowledge about what comedy is. So how can we tell that a show is comedy or isn't if our understanding of comedy, of jokes, and laughter is very limited because we have only started questioning it and studying it the last century? So what do you think? Is The Bear redefining comedy? Or am I just gaslighting myself into accepting that it is a comedy when it's clearly not? So make sure you leave us a comment on our social media. I would really appreciate to read your comments if you agree with me and why, if you disagree and why. And make sure you give us a like, follow us, and maybe share our articles with your friends. Thank you and see you next time.